I love the flashback scenes that they do of him.
I love the way that was shot with like the old school.
It's shot on 16 millimeter.
16, yeah.
So 16 millimeter.
It looks like Vietnam footage.
Well, it's literally, they couldn't. It was the 60s. They couldn't bring like a video camera into, so they shot it on small 16 millimeter, which the camera's about like this big. It's about like a little less than a foot, and you kind of like crank a wheel.
Yeah.
And
Spike Lee like actually used that.
I don't know what camera he actually used.
That's the use,
but he used the same exact type of film that would have been used in Vietnam.
Gotcha.
And I love how these flashback scenes of they don't have younger actors.
I thought that was an interesting choice. At first, it was a little goofy, but then you're like, it's kind of cool because it almost makes their experience more real in a sense. Like, you see them at that age struggling with what they're dealing with, and then when you see them in those scenes, it's like, oh yeah, because it's still that real for them.
Well, it gives this kind of feeling that the war in the 60s and 2020 are going on simultaneously, which if you look in these characters' heads and their psyche, like that is how it is. When they look at Vietnam, that's how they see it, because to them, it's not something that happened 50 years ago. It's something that's going on in their mind all the time.
Which is horrifying to think. I mean, I used to be, just as a quick example of something like this, like I used to drive for rideshare services. Like I drove Lyft for a while, and I remember, first of all, you get all different types of walks of life who come into your car, but this one time, this guy got in my car, and he was like deep into his 80s. He might have actually been in his early 90s. And he was a World War II veteran. And like, I don't know if it's because of his advanced age, but it was almost as if that was the only thing he did. Like he was wearing the hat. He immediately started talking about it. I was trying to ask him about a bunch of different things. Obviously that's interesting, but I was trying to ask him. Yeah. Because I was riding with him for a while, and he was an older guy, so he was like, very trying to talk to me and stuff. And just the idea that you could do something. What's Chadwick Boseman's character supposed to be? 19?
Yeah, man. If he was fighting in Vietnam, then he would have been either early 20s or late teens.
I feel like they mentioned 19 at one point, but the point is like the idea that you could do something that defines the rest of your life at that young of an age is really scary. And I'm not making light of it. I understand. That, of course. I mean, my generation. I knew people who went to the Iraq War. I know one kid in particular that we weren't the closest of friends, but we grew up in the same circle playing music, and he went off to Iraq, and he is shot. Like he came back, and like, I'm not obviously not everyone has that experience, but he just kind of fucking went off the deep end.
Well, I think a lot of what this movie is kind of trying to say of like, these four characters, these four Vietnam vets, they went through something in their early 20s, and kind of the rest of their life is just spent unpacking it.
Yeah, which is fucking horrifying. And
we see that like it's great, like especially with the character Otis, who Clark Peters, who I like that they gave him a daughter that he didn't know about, because at first I thought like it was kind of corny, but the more I'm thinking about it, it's kind of like a piece of him was left in Vietnam, and it's like literally a piece of him is left in Vietnam. Yeah. And it's another thing that it's obviously veterans don't go through this, but for regular civilians, we can see the Vietnam War as something in the past. When a war is kind of over, we can say like, okay, that's over and done with. But the country that we went to war with, that was invaded, still has to deal with everything. And I think it's kind of saying something that he didn't know that he had a daughter, but this Vietnamese woman then had to raise this girl by herself. Of like, yeah, you were able to leave Vietnam, and in some ways you were able to leave the war behind you.
I get what you're saying.
And I'm
It's a
still
little
living
symbolic.
with the effects of it.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of that is, that's shown throughout the entire movie of, the Vietnamese villagers, who most of the characters that we see who kind of hate the Americans are not the older Vietnamese people.
It's the ones who felt the effect of it
Yes.
because their older relatives were killed.
Because we see one of the earlier scenes, which is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, is an older Vietnamese man buys them all drinks because, he was a soldier in the North Vietnamese army, and I guess he kind of sees some connection to the soldiers in America. So he clearly is okay with it, has unpacked it, and kind of is fine with what has happened to him in the war. But the younger people who maybe didn't see the war or were too young to remember it, but remember the effects of it, they're the ones who are angry at them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's the whole idea of like what we're doing in the Middle East, where it's like, you're creating more generations of people that are going to hate America.
Yes.
And it's like we don't even end wars anymore. So it's like, your whole concept about like, oh, the daughter is a symbol of like, we can leave and
Right.
I'm still dealing with the effects of the war. Now we don't even end wars, so we don't have to worry about that, I guess.
It's crazy to think about troops currently in Iraq.
It's almost 20 years.
So I remember when we first invaded, I was very young. I was 9, and then you would have been 13.
Yes.
So I remember when we first invaded, I was worried that you were going to get drafted at 18, and I thought, no draft ever happened, but
I know.
it's crazy to think of.
It was on the table.
It was on the table for a little bit. I remember that people were scared.
Yeah.
There was a time when George W. Bush seriously considered a draft, and people were scared. And I remember I was 9 or 10, and I was thinking, well, in 4 years when Mike's 18, the war will be over by then, because why would? And then I turned 18, and I was old enough to be drafted, and the war still isn't over. And now I'm 27, and the war still isn't over.
I know.
Yeah, so I guess this message, it applies to wars that ended. It doesn't apply really to what's currently happening in, Iraq or Afghanistan.